This might be a lens you want to pick up. For the price point, for the optics. Now, before we kick things off, I'm not paid or sponsored for this video. These are my thoughts and my thoughts only. Viltrox did send me the lens for review, but I'm going to tell you the pros and the cons. It is like using a Zeiss Otis lens. It's a beast, but optically, it's like a Zeiss Otis lens. It is friggin' phenomenal. Even at 1.8, wide open 1.8, Viltrox has created a great 135. At half the price, you have a lens that competes with the likes of Sony, Canon, and Nikon, and the 135 1.8 range. But this is a big boy. There's lenses that have a longer focal length and zooms that are the same weight as this, I should say. With that said though, it's half the price, roughly, versus all those other ones. So that's something to consider as well. Close focusing is about 0.72 meters on this, which is roughly the same you're getting out of the other lenses. But optically, even at 1.8, man, this thing is bitingly sharp. Now I'm testing on the A7RV here, 60 megapixels. It resolves it beautifully. Now this Lab series from Viltrox is a new line of lenses. They're calling it their pinnacle in terms of optical performance. And from what I'm seeing right now, yeah, I can't wait to see what else they come out with. I heard there's a 35, a 50, and an 85. I think the 85 would probably be a bit more digestible versus this one in terms of size. I mean, hopefully they make the 85 smaller. But anyway, what we're gonna do is walk around Chinatown a little bit here and take some photos. Also, I'll be showing you some other photos I've taken over the past couple of weeks. My partner and I actually went to the zoo, so she took some images of the zoo, which were beautiful, and then also some street photography as well. And let's talk about the lens. So let's talk about optical performance on this, right? Because that's the most important thing. You spend about 900 USD, probably get a better deal depending on where you buy it from. Where am I going to? There's a band playing. I don't think they're the Beatles, that's for sure. You see some oval shapes, some cat's eyes in the corner. Very well corrected though. Very, very nice. It's that time of year here. There you go, buddy. Let's talk about this lens for a second here in terms of this OLED display. Now, it's nice that Viltrox has this and they put on other lenses as well. Some they have, some they don't. And it does give you some information, but I think on a 135 1.8, it's not something you're probably gonna look at much. Now you can customize some of the graphics and you can put some custom text on it. You can do that all through the phone app, but yeah, it adds a visual appeal to the lens and it makes it look, much more expensive than it is. But I think in day-to-day usage, I've been using this over the past few weeks, I've never used it, but nonetheless, it's nice to have. But in terms of the switches on this, you always obviously have an autofocus and manual focus switch. You can click the aperture on and off, but again, doesn't really make much of a difference anyway. And then of course you have the 1.5 meters to get full in terms of your focusing range on that. Obviously because it's 135 lens, and you have custom function buttons here as well, so you can program those inside the phone app. And that's pretty much it. One thing I do want to talk about is this hood, which I think is a really nice hood. And there's something also really nice about it as well. Inside, it's layered with felt. I like it, except the size. See my hand? My fingers hit, my knuckles hit right there at the base of the lens. Unfortunate. That's a bit tough. Wish it was a little bit narrower. You can't have it all for about $800 to $900 for a lens of this quality and caliber. Half the price of the Canon, Nikon, and Sony, respectively. And optically, as you're seeing through the images here in this video, it's pretty friggin' amazing. All right, let's talk about autofocus performance on this. It's very, very good. Is it as good as a native Sony lens? The answer may be not quite. I'd say it's probably a hair slower, but at a 135 1.8, you're not going for speed. I don't think you're gonna be shooting like fast action sports with this. You could, and you would work, but it's probably not gonna be the same speed as a native Sony G Master lens, or a GM2 lens for that matter, which are fantastic. Now these have dual voice coil motors inside of it, so it is quick. And but when I first got the lens, it wasn't working that well for autofocus. And I'll talk about that in just a bit in the video, but everything is fixed now and it's working. And when you get your lens, if you decide to pick one of these up, just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on, update your firmware first. Update the firmware before you use the lens. And I'll tell you how to do that later on this video, because that's one caveat that Viltrox doesn't really talk to you about, but it is a necessity. And by the way, for all their lenses, check their website if there's firmware updates, because if you purchase one of their lenses maybe a few months ago and you're like, okay, the performance was okay, chances are there's an update that actually makes it better. But they don't publicize this, so you're gonna have to actually search and find out yourself. So just keep that in mind. Anyway, walk around Chinatown now. It's not that crowded here tonight, but there's some things happening here. And take some photos and let's have some fun. Hi, how are you? I take your photo? Smile! Oh, very nice. Can I take a photo of you too? Thank you very much. Well, let's talk about one thing about this lens that does bother me, and Chris Nichols from Petapixel said the same thing. It's the aperture ring. Now, this could sort of be fixed via firmware if you could actually turn it off and just control the aperture via the camera body, but you can't. So how it works is you turn the aperture ring, it's the ring closest to the rear element, and you keep turning it, and the clicks don't match the aperture numbers, that's one thing. And you turn it all the way to the right to go to sort of into auto mode where you control it via the camera body. However, there's no lock switch. So it's very easy to hit the aperture ring and knock it out of whack, and then you could be at f16 or f11 or whatever it may be, and you're not at the aperture that you want to be. So you have to always double check. Now, what I like to do is just turn it off completely, and you can customize the functions or some of the functions of this lens inside the phone app. That's how you even update it. We'll talk about that later on. But you can't turn off the ring, which would be nice to do. So hopefully Viltrox adds that into a future firmware update where we can actually customize it to actually turn it off or make it be something else or whatever have you. So yeah, that's just one of the things that bother me about it. But outside of that, it's a pretty damn good lens to use, man. Except I need a vertical grip. I really need a vertical grip for this thing, and I got big hands. Coming up on this temple here. Don't know if I can go inside or not, but take some photos outside. I just left the temple there, and in terms of, it's obviously not a busy night here, so it's gonna be a little bit more quiet, but in terms of the autofocusing, I have to say this lens has improved a lot from when I first got it. Now, when I got it, I mean, the autofocus was very slow and very inconsistent, so I reached out to Viltrox because I thought I might have gotten a bad copy, because I think in the beginning there were some issues. And they said, you might need to update the firmware on the lens, which I went to the website and I didn't see any firmware update for it. They said, no, you have to download the Viltrox app to the phone and then you update it via that way. But there's no literature on the website on this, so that's exactly what I did and it worked out great. There was a firmware update and now the autofocus for the most part is really good. Once in a while it will miss, but that's like any lens or any camera system for predominantly. But I will say that the autofocusing speed, I found it to be very close to a native Sony lens. Obviously Sony lenses will have an edge because they are, designed to have the best performance overall, but I have to say this is a very, very good job. I mean, it's a great little lens for street photography. I won't say little lens. It's a great big lens for street photography in a way because you don't want to get too close to your subject. Obviously, nowadays people are more aware of cameras and being photographed or put on social media. 135 kind of gives you some distance and some separation as well, but teach their own. Some people like 85. the 135 will give you that, but the performance has been improved since that firmware update. And by the way, in terms of updating the lens via the phone, there's two ways you can do it. Because you connect it to the lens via Bluetooth. So either you have to power on the lens separately away from the camera system, so you plug in a USB-C cable from a power source into the rear element area where there's a USB-C port, or you turn on the camera with the lens attached, and that will also power on the lens. Then you sync it up via Bluetooth. Now, if you have power saving mode on your camera, you got to turn it off, especially if you're going to be updating the firmware. But what I did is I actually just plugged in the lens separately. Then there's continuous power going into it. Then I just updated it by that way via Bluetooth, because it does take some time to update the firmware. But not a lot of instructions on this. So Viltrox, if you're watching this video, perhaps you can sort of update the website on how to do these things, because they don't really tell you. And yeah, it's a little bit odd. Final thoughts on this lens. I'm a big fan of what this lens delivers. I mean, I've talked about it all night repeatedly, so I don't want to keep repeating myself, but it's really good. It's just big. Now, compared to the Sony, Nikon, and Canon options out there, obviously the price point brand new, it's half the price, and maybe even less, lesser than that, depending on the brand that you get. However, if you find a good secondhand lens from Canon, Nikon, or Sony on the market, that does bring the price down. And most of those lenses are probably in really good condition, because a lens like this is not something that you beat around. I mean, it's a portraiture lens. It's a lens you might use in a studio or in a controlled environment, so you're probably not going to bang it around too much. So you probably find some really good deals on a lens like that, and makes it that makes it a little bit more challenging. So if size is going to be an issue for you and weight, carrying this around all day, again, when us reviewers review a lens, right, we're not carrying around for 7-8 hours at a time. We go to a location, we shoot, we talk about it, we put it in our backpack, and we go home. But for you guys out there who work and do this for a living, and let's say you're going to use this for weddings or for events, and you're going to be carrying this all day long, you're going to feel this, but the optics are there. So it's a trade-off. Which one do you want? And price point too. So anyway, those are my thoughts on it. I like it. I'm excited to see what Viltrox brings into the future. And for those out there who are surprised to see something like this come from China, or Asia for that matter, I'm like, I live here for 19 years. Welcome to Asia. There's phenomenal lens manufacturers out here, and people in the camera industry are doing some amazing things. We get a lot of access here. It's quite cool to see, but it's also awesome to see people out there going, hey, wait a second, there's some new players in town, and they're really bringing their A game, and Viltrox is one of them. So there you have it, guys. With that, like, subscribe. Thank you for the support, and I'll chat to you all very, very soon. Bye.